The people in the back, can you hear me clearly? Okay, good. Have you ever had a question in mind for so long that it becomes part of how you think? Maybe even part of who you are a person. Well, had I've had a question in my mind for many years, and that is how can you speed up learning? Now this is an interesting question because if you speed up learning, you can spend less time at school, and if you learn really fast, you probably won't have to go to school at all. Now, when I was young, school was sort of okay, but I found quite often that school got in the way of learning. So I had this question in mind: how do you learn faster? And this began when I was very young. When I was 11 years old, I wrote a letter to researcher in the team union asking, "This is sleep learning, where you get tape recorder, you put it beside your bed, and it turns on in the middle of the night when you're sleeping, and you're supposed to be learning from this." A good idea, and from suddenly it doesn't work, but nobody did open the door, and we had incredible board learning that began with the first question I want to from the become person about psychology, and I've involved in psychology for the rest of my life up until this point in 19, and in addition that I was going to be native level in Chinese inside 2 years. Now you need to understand that I in Chinese was really difficult, and that was a cold study for 10 years and never really get ever. And I also went in the world different idea, which was talking all of the conclusion for psychology research up to the point and applying them to the learning process. What it was called was, and it took a little bit longer to get up the native, but I looked around and saw a lot of the people from different countries struggling travel with Chinese. I saw Chinese people struggling traveling to learning English and other language, and so my question got refined down to how can you help a normal adult learn a new language quickly, easily, and effectively. Now this is a really important question in today's world where we have massive challenge with environment, we have massive challenge with social digitalization, with work all sort on this going on. And if can communicate, we're really going to have difficult solving this problem. So we need to be able to speak each other language. This is really important. The question in is how do you that? Well, it's actually really easy. You look around for people who can already do it. You look for a situation where it's already working, and then you identify principle and apply them. It's called modeling, and I've been looking at language learning and modeling language learning for about, and my conclusion, my observation from this is that any adult can learn second language to fluency inside 6 months. Now, when I say this, most people think I'm crazy. This is not possible. So let me remind everybody of the history of human progress. It's all about our limit. In and Roger Benson in 19, and from there it's got shorter and shorter. Except it does, and we all know this. How does heavy stuff fly? We recognize the material using principle that we have learned from observed natural birth in the case, and today we have even further. You can buy. We now have cars in the world that fly. The third is different way to fly, which we've learned from Socrates. So you need to discover what a flying circle does. Build a circle, a wingsuit, and off you go. You can fly like a squirrel now. Most people, a lot of people, I won't say everybody, but a lot of people think they can draw. However, There are some key principle, five principle that you can apply to learning draw, and you can actually learn to draw in 5 days, 5 days. This principle from 5 days and apply them, and after 5 days you can draw something like this. Now I know this is true because that was my first drawing, and after applying this principle that was be able to do and allow in this when wow, so that how I look like when I'm considering so instantly that my brain is exploding. So anybody can learn to draw in 5 days, and in the same with the same logic, anybody can learn a second language in 6 months. How? There are 5 principles and 7 actions. There may be 4 more, but that's absolute core. And before I get into those, I just want to talk about 2 minutes. The first is that you need talent. Let me tell you about Zoo. Zoo come from Australia. Went to Ireland. We're trying to learn Dutch, structuring extremely a great deal. And finally people were saying your company use you're not talent. Give up. You're a waste of time. And she was very depressed, and that he came across the and in 6 months she was fluent in Portuguese. So talent doesn't matter. People also think that person in new country in the way to learn a language. But look around Hong Kong. Look at all Westerners who been here for 10 years who don't speak Chinese. Look at all the Chinese living at America, Britain, Australia, Canada have their and then any English immersion process no work. Why? Because a driving man cannot learn to swim. When you don't speak a language, you're like a baby, and if you drop yourself into context, which is all a tool talking about stuff over your head, you won't learn. So, what are 5 principles that you need to pay attention to? First, the 4 word attention, meaning relevant and memory, and this include in a very important way. Come with me now, journey through a forest. You can and you see something like this little mark on a tree. Maybe you pay attention, maybe you don't. You got another, you should be paying attention. Another 50 haven't been paying attention, and at it point you're paying attention and you've just learned that this is important, it's relevant because it's in this, and anything that is related and any information your survival, and therefore you're going to remember it if it related to your personal goals, and you're going to pay attention to it. If it's relevant, you're going to remember it. So the first rule, first principle for learning a language is focus on language contents that is relevant to you, which brings us to tool. We master tool by using tools, and we learn tools best when they are relevant to us. So let me share a story. A keyboard is a tool. Typing Chinese a certain way. There are methods for this test tool. It had a college many years ago. Who went to night school Thursday night. 2 hours each time practicing at home. She spending months. And one night we had a crisis. We had 48 till into the far, and she got the job, and I can greet you in because it was relevant, it meaning it was important. She was using a tool to create value. So the second principle for learning a language is to use your language as a tool to communicate right from day one. As a kid does when I first arrived in China, I didn't speak a word of Chinese, and on my second week I got take a train ride overnight. I spent hours sitting in the dining car talking to one of the drivers on the train. He took an interest in for some reason, and we just chat in Chinese, and he was drawing picture and making moment with his hand. I understood more and more, but What was really cool, what was weeks later, when people were talking Chinese around me, I was understanding some of this, and I had even met any ever to learn that what had happened I absorbed on the train, which bring us this principle. Chanyu will occur in the language actually, and this is really well documented now. It's something the step creation or leader in the field has published all sorts of this different study, and this is just from one of them. The people bars saw the score on different that's of four languages in the people were the green ones are the ones who earn by compressible input. So impression were compression in K and language learning not about accumulated knowledge in many words. A woman I know from Taiwan did great in English at school. She got a great way through, went through college a grade, went to the arts, and found the school didn't understand what people were saying, and people start asking her, "Are you deaf?" And she was English deaf because we have filter in our brain that filtering the sound familiar with, and you filter out sound of language that were not. And if you can hear, you won't understand. If you can understand it, you're not going to learn it. So you actually have to be able to hear the sound, the and but it's psychology training. Speaking text musical you can't you face. You have to coordinate in those in a way that you make sound that other people understand. If you ever done new support and you know how your body feels, you first hurting you're doing it right. And the final principle is state psychology state. If you're sad, angry, or upset, you're not going to learn period. If you're happy, relaxed, and upper state curious, you're going to learn really quickly. And very especially you need to be tolerant of ambiguity. If you're one of those people who needs to understand 1%, because you'll be incredibly upset all the time because you're not perfect. If you come to with getting some, not getting some, just paying attention to what I understand, you're going to be fine, relaxing, and you'll be learning quickly. So based to on the principle, what the 7 action that you take. Number one, listen a lot. I call it brain soaking. You put yourself in a context where you're hearing tones of language in, and it doesn't matter if you understand it or not. You're listening to read. You're listening to things that stand out. Chinese Pao Naozi. English so just soak your brain in this. The second action is that you get meaning first. Even before you get the word, you go, well, how do I do that? I don't know the word. Well, you understand what does. Different posture, man. Human communication is body language in many ways. From body language, you can understand a lot of communication. Therefore, your understanding your occurring door, comprehensible input, and you can also use filter that you call a no. If you're a Chinese speak, you will understand 60% of what the conversation, because Vietnam is about 30% Mandarin, 30%. The third action start missing. You probably have never thought of this, but you got for nouns and adjective. You can say to 1000. What do babies do? Okay, me bed now. Okay, that how they communicate. So starting mission, get straight, have fun with it. It doesn't perfect just how to. You're focused on the core. What does the meaning? While any language is high frequency content in English, then word of anything you're ever going to say daily communication to 33 3000. You got 3000 words, you're speaking the language. The rest is easing on the cake. And when you're just beginning with a new language, start with your toolbox with number one in your new language. You say this slide. How do you say that? I don't understand. Repeat the please. What does it mean? All in your target language. You're using it as a tool, making it useful to you. It's relevant to learn other things about the language. We would to you should be saying like this: me, this, you, that, give, you know, how. Simple pronoun, simple noun, simple verb. Simple adjective communicating like a baby. And by the third, if the word you're getting into clue word, although but therefore there's a relational transformer. At that point you're talking, and when you're doing that, you should get yourself a language parent. If you look at how children and parents interact, you'll understand what this means. When a child is speaking, it's be using simple words, simple combinations, sometimes with strength, sometimes very strong pronunciation. Other people from outside the family don't understand it, but the parent do, and so the kid a safe informant get confidence. The parent talk to the children with body language and with simple language. Now the child understands, so you have a comprehensible input information that safe begin now its word as noun. So you get yourself a language parent. So who somebody interested into you, a person who will communicate with you essentially as a question. There are forms of language parents. Spouses are not very good at this, okay? But the forms are, first of all, they will work hard to understand what you mean, even when you're off it. Secondly, they will never correct your mistake. Thirdly, so that you can respond appropriately and get that feedback, and then they will use word that you know. The sixth is copy the face. You got to so you can talk in the way that people will understand you. There's a couple of things you do. One is that you hear how it feel and feel how it sound, which means you have a feedback loop operating in your face. But ideally, if you can look at a native speaker and just observe how they use their face, like your unconscious mind about absorb the rules, you're going to be able to pick up. And if you can get native speakers to look at, you can ask stuff like this: female voicing song King Stone Hung, Chris Longstaff. It's something that I call direct connect. What does it mean? Well, most people learning a second language, sure, again and again in their mind to try and remember them really inefficient. What you need to do is realize that everything you know is an image. Inside your mind is a feeling. If you talk about fire, you can smell the smoke. You can hear the crackling. You can see the flames. Do you that imagery, that memory, and you come out of that pathway, and you build it over time. You become more and more skilled at just connecting the new song to those images that you already have into that international presentation, and over time you even become naturally good at the process that becomes unconscious shoulder or fall. If you do any of them, you're going to improve. And remember, these are things under your control as the learner. Do them all, and you're going to be fluent in a second language in 6 months. Thank you, Plush.